What did Buddha say about vegetarianism that even scientists bow to? Welcome back, everyone, to Mind Podcast. Are you truly understanding vegetarianism? Are you following Buddha's teachings on how to be vegetarian correctly? We received some interesting comments like this. I occasionally visit the Gyakduk vegetarian restaurant on Winding Trio Street, where I noticed monks and nuns ordering from the reception pork belly, roasted beef, sliced fried chicken legs, and breaded anchovies. Listening to these practitioners of strict precepts call for mock meat dishes just seemed too odd. Vegetarianism is voluntary, so why the need to hide behind mock meat dishes? I think being vegetarian means turning away from meat and ceasing all killing, nurturing compassion, and following Buddha's example. Yet why does vegetarianism sometimes carry a longing for meat? And then some say, eating meat and speaking truth is better than being vegetarian and lying. Thus, they believe as long as there's a compassionate heart, whether one eats meat or not doesn't matter. Others wonder if eggs and milk are considered vegetarian. From the audience's comments, we see there are still many differing views on this issue. So today, let's clarify Buddha's teachings on vegetarianism. In everyday understanding, vegetarianism means consuming pure foods without meat, fish, or the pungent substances in the 5 pungent spices group, such as onions, chives, garlic, scallions, and leeks. If one consumes meat, fish, and these spices, it's called eating meat. However, the original word chai, vegetarian, means purity. It also refers to time-based eating, meaning eating before noon, as eating after noon is considered improper. In early Buddhism and sectarian Buddhism, time-based eating meant a meal before noon. In the development of Mahayana Buddhism, stemming from compassion and non-harming, vegetarianism evolved to mean not consuming meat. Nowadays, being vegetarian refers to this interpretation. The opposite of being vegetarian is a term that doesn't mean salty, but rather points to consuming the lives of animals. Over time, this term has shifted in pronunciation and interpretation, now known as eating salty, but actually means eating lives. Sentient beings feel uncomfortable. In scientific terms, vegetarians and vegans are categorized differently. Vegetarian refers to individuals who abstain from eating the meat of animals. They define meat as the flesh of sentient beings capable of feeling and moving independently, meaning animals that can walk, crawl, wriggle, fly, and swim. However, vegetarians may still consume eggs and drink milk. Vegan, on the other hand, refers to vegetarians who do not consume eggs, milk, or dairy products such as butter and cheese. In summary, vegans avoid any products derived from animal bodies. Some may ask if the purpose of vegetarianism in Buddhism aligns with the scientific rationale for vegetarianism. It is clear that the purpose of vegetarianism in Buddhism differs from the scientific view. The purpose of Buddhist vegetarianism is to respect and protect life. Respecting life is a core principle in Buddhism, and the precept of non-killing is intended to protect that life. For Buddhists, vegetarianism is a practical expression of this principle. A Buddhist high monk once taught that killing one life to sustain another is delusion. Harming life for one's own survival is ignorance. Thus, respecting life involves not only helping each other to survive, but sometimes even sacrificing one's life to protect other lives. Buddhism emphasizes and upholds the principle of altruism, directing all actions toward the respect for life. In Mahayana Buddhism, vegetarianism is mandatory for each Buddhist practitioner. However, many followers of Theravada Buddhism believe that vegetarianism is not essential for Buddhists. Firstly, if Buddha had considered non-meat foods suitable according to the precepts, he would have declared it, and this would have at least been recorded in the Pali Canon. However, we do not see any such mention. Secondly, unless we directly kill an animal to consume its meat, we are not directly responsible for its death. With this understanding, there is no essential difference between vegetarians and non-vegetarians. Even vegetarians consume plant-based foods that farmers cultivate, often harming countless organisms, and pesticides are sprayed, killing even more beings. Thirdly, even though vegetarians may avoid eating meat, they still use numerous other products that lead to animal slaughter, such as silk, leather, serums, silk thread, etc. Why not avoid one product if others are still being used? Fourthly, virtues like compassion, patience, generosity, and honesty, as well as negative qualities such as ignorance, pride, hypocrisy, envy, and indifference, do not depend on what we put into our mouths. Thus, food is not the main factor in spiritual development. Buddhists who do not follow a vegetarian diet, including both lay people and monks, often refer to the Jivaka Sutra, where the Buddha stated that he forbids eating meat only in 3 specific cases: if it is seen, heard, or suspected that the animal was killed for one's consumption. Otherwise, one may eat meat if there is no sight, sound, or suspicion that the animal was slaughtered for them. This group argues that if a person did not kill the animal themselves, it means there was no intention to kill, so eating that meat poses no problem. Although death occurs, they claim that meat eaters do not generate killing karma. They are entirely uninvolved in the killing itself. They argue that most people do not consume meat with an intention to harm, but rather out of habit from childhood, as part of their culture, because they know how to cook and eat it in a way that suits them. Thus, they believe taste preferences and cultural influences are shaped by upbringing. If you're accustomed to a certain food, you'll feel comfortable consuming it. That's why many Australians, for instance, aren't vegetarian. They eat meat because it's part of their cultural familiarity and culinary tradition. However, vegetarian Buddhists counter this by citing verses 129 and 130 from the Dhammapada, which clearly state that we should neither kill nor cause killing. They refer to several scriptures in the original Pali Canon, where the Buddha's teachings discourage killing, encouraging others to avoid it and abstain from accepting acts of killing. They argue that even purchasing meat or meat-based products makes one complicit as it creates demand, indirectly causing others to slaughter animals. Animals like cows, goats, pigs, and chickens are killed in slaughterhouses specifically to satisfy meat eaters. If no one consumed meat, these animals would not be killed. They argue that it is unfair for us to create a situation where butchers are sent to hell due to our culinary enjoyment. If everyone agreed to be vegetarian, those who currently slaughter animals for profit would have to shift to more positive, blessed professions, leading the world toward peace and harmony. By continuing to consume animals, we perpetuate a profession based on killing. Pitifully, they also quote a teaching from a modern High Buddhist monk, Venerable Tit Chi Tin, who speaks about vegetarianism as follows: "We should know that if we want to eat meat, it involves killing. Even if we do not kill the animal ourselves, we encourage someone else to do so. Eating meat is thus the cause of the slaughter of living beings. All kinds of meat, whether pork, beef, shrimp, or shellfish, which belong to the animal realm, should not be consumed. Some argue that shellfish and shrimp, for example, do not have blood and are therefore acceptable to eat. Others say that an unformed egg is harmless and can be eaten because it doesn't feel pain. However, upon closer examination, we see that these foods belong to the animal realm and should not be eaten at all. Even though shrimp and shellfish lack blood, they still have a will to live and a fear of death. A snail will retract into its shell at a sound, and a shrimp will jump away when touched, showing they have awareness and fear, just like us. As for eggs, some argue that since an egg has not yet developed into a creature, there is no sin in eating it. By that logic, if a fetus of 1 or 2 months in the womb is aborted, would there be no sin since it hasn't taken shape yet? If we consider abortion to be sinful, then eating eggs must also be sinful, as an egg, given the right conditions, would become a chicken or some other animal. We've just presented arguments from both sides regarding meat consumption. This raises the question, did Buddha accept meat eating? In the Jivaka Sutra, Buddha allowed the consumption of 3 types of meat under specific conditions, if it was not seen, heard, or suspected that the animal was killed specifically for one's consumption. Additionally, Buddha permitted the consumption of meat from animals that had died naturally or had been left over after being caught and killed by other animals. In other sutras, however, Buddha explicitly prohibited his followers from engaging in bloody trades or occupations involving slaughterhouses, hunting, fishing, and animal trapping. Why the apparent contradiction? Non-vegetarian Buddhists claim that the Jivaka Sutra allows them to eat meat and interpret it to mean that Buddha indirectly approved of slaughterhouses. They argue that meat produced in slaughterhouses, typically located far from populated areas, is now sold in supermarkets. Therefore, buyers neither hear the cries nor see the suffering of animals, nor do they suspect that the animals were killed specifically for them, meeting the three conditions Buddha mentioned. However, it must be noted that Buddha prohibited Buddhists from working in slaughterhouses due to his emphasis on compassion. While Buddha forbade blood-soaked professions such as slaughterhouses, hunting, fishing, and trapping, he seemingly allowed monks and Buddhists to consume meat if the animal was not killed explicitly for them, creating an illogical contradiction. Who else but meat-eaters bears responsibility for the killings in slaughterhouses, hunting, and fishing industries? The butchers are merely performing a service for meat-eaters. "Sir, I am only doing the dirty work for you," a butcher once said to an upper-class person who criticized the cruelty of slaughtering innocent animals. Whether or not animals are killed specifically for them, meat-eaters indirectly support the meat industry and contribute to the brutality and killing of sentient beings. Could it be that Buddha, described as the all-knowing, one whose wisdom and compassion encompass the universe, was unaware of or insensitive to the fact that simply abstaining from meat could effectively end the suffering and horrors inflicted upon weak, silent animals? Every Buddhist knows that Buddha was extremely compassionate and valued life immensely. For example, he emphasized that monks must observe a 3-month rainy season retreat without venturing outside to avoid stepping on insects that breed during the rainy season. Therefore, it is hard to believe that he could be indifferent to the pain and suffering of livestock killed for food. What is the real reason? We will find the answer at the end of the video. Next, let's look at a controversial question in Buddhist history that has sparked much debate. Did Buddha pass away because he ate pork? This question has led some monks to justify their own consumption of meat. Many claim that Buddha ate a bowl of pork soup at a disciple's house to avoid offending the donor by refusing the offering. However, most Buddhist scholars believe that the food offered to Buddha was not meat and that Buddha's death was not caused by it. All Mahayana sutras strictly oppose meat consumption. According to Buddhist scholar R. David, the food that the layperson Kunda offered Buddha was mushrooms. David argues that the term Sukara Madhava combines Sukara, meaning pig, and Madhava, meaning delicious, or food that wild boars like to eat. Western scholars translate it as a type of valuable mushroom. Sukara Madhava has 4 meanings. First, it is a type of food pigs eat. Second, it is food that pigs particularly enjoy. Third, it refers to soft parts of a pig's body. And fourth, it is food that has been trampled by a pig. Kunda, a devout disciple of Buddha, would not likely offer him a bowl of pork soup, knowing that Buddha abstained from meat. It is also likely that Kunda himself did not consume meat, like many Indians of that time. Would he then offer meat to Buddha, someone deeply sensitive to the suffering of sentient beings? Buddha refused to drink cow's milk in the first 10 days after a cow gives birth, and he declined an offering of fruit that had ants living on it. He even instructed the monastic community to stay indoors during the 3-month rainy season retreat, to avoid stepping on insects breeding in the rain. There is one aspect of Buddha's final meal that we should note. According to the Digha Nikaya, after receiving the bowl of mushroom soup from Kunda, Buddha instructed him not to serve the remaining soup to the other monks. Kunda complied and withdrew. This suggests that Buddha did not consume meat. In summary, all Buddhists, regardless of tradition or school, share a common foundation. They respect and protect life and observe the precept of non-killing as a means to preserve that life. However, there are differences in how they practice this principle, which is understandable. These differences arise from the varied mindsets, capacities, and environments of sentient beings, as well as different spatial and temporal contexts. For example, the circumstances of Buddhists in Tibet differ from those of Vietnamese Buddhists, and they are even more distinct from Buddhists living in the United States. Even within Vietnam, monks in the south, following the Mahayana tradition, have different circumstances than some monks in the north from 1954 to 1975. Understanding these differing circumstances makes it easier to empathize and see that there is no problem. This context also helps explain why the Theravada scriptures lack a vegetarian precept and instead permit the consumption of 3 pure meat, meat from animals not seen, heard, or suspected to have been killed for oneself, while Mahayana scriptures have a precept prohibiting meat consumption. Buddha was a great healer, the king of physicians. Before he taught, he would observe his audience, assess their capacity to understand the teachings, and present suitable teachings to cure their mental afflictions. Thus, we understand that each of Buddha's words was directed toward a specific purpose for a particular audience, in a specific place or time, to resolve their difficulties. Only by understanding the circumstances of his listeners can we understand Buddha's statements, as he spoke with the intent to liberate sentient beings, using expedient means in his teachings. Buddha's teachings were always adapted to circumstances, which means that no single teaching can be universally right or wrong. It all depends on the time, place, and context, as well as the capacity of each audience. In the Nirvana Sutra, Buddha explained why he initially allowed monks to eat 3 types of pure meat. He said, Kashyapa, these 3 kinds of pure meat were permitted as a temporary measure, adjusted according to circumstances. In the early period of Buddhism, due to its revolutionary and liberating content aimed at dismantling India's rigid caste divisions and discrimination, various forces sought to undermine Buddha's reputation. Also, due to objective difficulties in the social environment, Buddha had to adapt his approach to promote and preserve the Dharma while ensuring its survival. In ancient times, simplicity in food was necessary for the practice, and food was regarded as medicinal. Therefore, Buddha's monks practiced alms begging, going house to house without distinction of wealth, so all could have the opportunity to practice generosity and accumulate merit. Alms begging not only countered attachment to self, but also benefited both the monks and the laity, allowing monks to avoid time spent buying and cooking food. They would mix all food offerings together, avoiding distinctions between dishes, good or bad taste, so that eating was only for bodily nourishment and spiritual practice. In the context of India 2,500 years ago, where the people were poor and Buddha's community was large, sometimes numbering over 1,000 monks during alms rounds, it was impractical to reject food offerings, which might cause resentment in generous donors. Accepting food offerings, even if they contained meat, was purely coincidental. The monks focused solely on sustenance to practice and attain enlightenment, and Buddha did not impose strict demands due to such difficult circumstances. Thanks to the non-killing precept established by Buddha, which gradually permeated the community, Buddhists stopped slaughtering animals, replacing animal-based food with plants and vegetables. Eventually, they would offer vegetables and fruits instead. We have presented various perspectives on vegetarianism and meat eating, recognizing that each person has unique views and capacities, and that no one can impose their beliefs on others. Differences should not be grounds for debate if we all respect each other's choices, as these differences stem from one's circumstances, environment, access to scriptures, karma, and individual lifestyle choices. One thing we can all agree on is that Buddhism is not a religion of blind faith. Buddha taught us not to believe in something just because it is tradition, a holy scripture, or the words of a teacher, but only to believe in what we have experienced, practiced, and found beneficial for ourselves and for all beings. Everything depends on our wisdom and compassion. We have the freedom to choose. Whether to be vegetarian or not is less important than choosing a meaningful lifestyle for oneself. May you succeed on your path of practice. This concludes today's video.